Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are At the Desk. I'm your host, Peter Alfaro, and in today's episode we will be talking about the tragic death of Timothy Piazza, exploring the current state of the race for the White House, looking into some of the Bellefonte's hidden history, playing a fun game with political cartoons, and diving into another edition of ATD International. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the crime panel to discuss the Penn State hazing tragedy that occurred not too long ago. Over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Peter. Timothy Piazza was just a sophomore here at Penn State University when he tragically died in February of 2017 after a fraternity hazing event. During a ceremony at Beta Theta Pi fraternity, he consumed an unhealthy amount of alcohol in a very short period of time. This resulted in him falling down a flight of stairs and suffering very serious injuries. The other members of the fraternity waited nearly 12 hours before calling 911. He was then taken into the hospital where he died 2 days later. The fraternity has since been permanently banned from Penn State's campus, and former President Brendan Young and Vice President Daniel Casey were sentenced to 2 to 4 months in jail due to their role in the hazing event. The pair pled guilty to 14 counts of hazing and 1 count of reckless endangerment. Today, we are going to dive deeper into the tragic events that unfolded and the awareness it brought to hazing and safety in college environments. Alrighty, Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you to give us more detail about that tragic event.
All right, so I'm going to cover the timeline. So I'm going to be reading a lot of times and a lot of events. So 8:56, he arrived at the Beta Theta Pi house. 9:21, he entered the gauntlet, which was like an obstacle course kind of thing that they had to go through. And that is when he consumed vodka and a lot of beer. 10:40, he was assisted onto a couch. Time unknown, he falls down the flight of stairs, which we know. He is then carried back upstairs and he's unresponsive. At 10:49, liquid is dumped on his face. At 11:14, Cordell Davis enters. He's important. He's the only fraternity brother that had concerns about Timothy Piazza. He spoke up as to what was going on, and he was then called crazy and told to kind of leave. At 11:25, Daniel Casey, the pledge master, slaps Timothy Piazza across the face, trying to wake him up. At 1 a.m., the brothers see puke all over the floor. 1:48 a.m., Tim Piazza rolls himself onto the floor. 3:54 a.m., he tries to get up and he hits his head on the floor because he falls over. 4:59 a.m., he staggers towards the front door of the house and he slams his head on the door. And you see on the video, the brothers actually step over him once he's on the floor. Then 10:48 a.m., that's finally when the fraternity brothers call 911. So you could see there was a lot of time, almost 12 hours before someone actually did something. There's video footage of Tim Piazza kind of stumbling all over. Brothers are seen stepped over him. They have the footage from the house. So a lot could have been done, and he could have been out there alive if his brothers did something sooner.
Even his brother said he tried to save himself multiple times, over and over, and he just couldn't because of the state he was in. And with no help on the way, I mean, what was he supposed to do in that situation? Sophia.
So many laws have been passed in order to prevent and punish hazing like this in the future. For example, in October 2018, Governor Tom Wolf signed an anti-hazing law named the Timothy Piazza Anti-Hazing Law, and this bill creates different tiers of hazing, making hazing that results in bodily injuries a third-degree demeanor unless someone is seriously injured or dies. Those extreme cases are treated as a third-degree felony. And punishments for this felony include up to 7 years in prison and a $15,000 fine. This law also requires secondary schools and universities to publish stricter anti-hazing policies and publicly report hazing violations. Lastly, it provides legal immunity to those in need of medical assistance due to hazing or underage alcohol consumption, and it also provides legal immunity to those who seek help for others. In New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy signed a similar Timothy J. Piazza law. Similar to PA's law, the penalties for violations include expulsion, suspension, and withholding of a diploma. And hazing that results in death or a serious injury will be considered a third-degree crime. And a prison sentence for these crimes was also increased from 18 months to 5 years. Most recently, a national bill titled the Stop Campus Hazing Act was just passed in the House of Representatives, and this bill would require universities to develop detailed anti-hazing programs and report hazing incidents in an annual national-wide security report. However, before becoming an official law, it still needs to be approved by the Senate and the President. Lastly, in January 2019, Penn State created the Timothy J. Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research and Reform. It sponsors national hazing research and manages a national scorecard on fraternities and sororities. They are currently working on many research projects focusing on topics such as early hazing warning signs and accountability models.
Yeah, which I think a lot of horrible accident, but I think a lot of good laws and precautions came out of this situation, and I think they are all very necessary. So Savannah, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you. Kind of talk to us about the other members of the fraternity beside the president and vice president.
All right, so 4 brothers pleaded guilty, but only 2, Brandon Young, the president, and Daniel Casey, the vice president and pledge master, faced prison time. They faced 2 to 4 months of prison time with 3 years probation and community service. Now, the other 2 brothers who did in fact plead guilty had a appeal with the courts against the president and vice president, kind of working to get their time down. And the case did take such a long time because there were appeals on each end due to the fact that cell phone evidence wasn't able to be used. And if you go by the house today, you know, the house was stripped of its letters. It is still there. But every other brother was kicked out of the house. They're no longer a fraternity here.
So, I will take over with now what
Give it
happens
over to you.
after.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm ready to go. I'm excited.
All
So
right.
anyway, so let's talk a little bit about Eric Barron, the then president, who preceded, who is currently right now our president, which is Neely Bendaputi. So he said, obviously, in many different interviews, the situation was a mess, and that there's not much that he can do, unfortunately, because these properties are classified and listed as private. Now, they could be owned by alumni organizations. They can be owned by the organization itself that occupies it, i.e. the brothers paying dues to the fraternity. It could be owned by the nationals, etc. And there's really not much the university can do besides say, hey, you're no longer a part of Penn State University. You're now just a property with quote-unquote brothers in State College. So there's really not much Eric Barron could have done besides really say Beta Theta Pi will never be a part of our school again. He was not the one who actually shut down the organization, declassified the property, took letters away. No, he didn't do any of that. Of course, he encouraged it, but he did disaffiliate the organization from the school, which was very important. And he was pressed about it, and he was honest about it. And in my opinion, the only thing he could say to the media is, I will do what I can, and that is not end this organization. And that's the most unfortunate part of this whole thing. Now, of course, the Penn State University of Greek and Sorority Life has been doing a lot stronger investigations and has been a lot tougher on situations like problems with hazing, with drinking, etc., in terms of university-sanctioned events, which means that they are going heavier on declassifying fraternities organized and affiliated with the school. But at the end of the day, there is really nothing that they could have done more than what they have done.
Yeah. I mean, let's be so for real. Hazing happens. Like, we all know it does. It happens at so many frat houses, even sororities. It happens all across the world, especially at Penn State. And at the end of the day, like, it's something they can only control to a certain extent. But I do think, especially this year and last year, Penn State has been cracking down a little more. I mean, if a fraternity steps out of line or does something, they are put on suspension. And they are trying to make more steps towards that in this day and
I
age.
want to add in, there are inspectors that do go around and check in on the hazing and everything. And there's certain laws, like, I know pledges can't wear suits to class, like things like that, that cannot happen now, that we know to look out for.
Right, absolutely. They do also do inspections prior to their parties. The university limited parties. Not only do they start to limit parties, but they also investigate the parties prior to them happening. They make sure there is no things like hard liquor. They make sure that the quote-unquote pledges are quote-unquote IDing in those individuals. So obviously, I'm saying it and it sounds ridiculous. Yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, the university knows it's not actually happening. They're doing what they can. This is private property. They're doing nothing but sanctioning these organizations. They are not controlling them. And that is why this culture is never going to change.
Right, because you can't have someone in a house at all times making sure everyone's not being hazed, like making sure everyone's safe every single step of the time. They can do what they can from the outside, but in reality, this stuff is going to continue to happen. I did have the chance to watch the Timothy Piazza documentary, and I do have to say I was disgusted. It was so upsetting. It was so disheartening. What was the most upsetting to me was the timeline that went, and there's camera footage. It wasn't included in the specific documentary I watched, but there's footage that you can watch from inside the house, and it just shows him being ignored. It shows him trying to help himself, and it just shows that nobody did anything in that moment to help him.
Exactly.
Pardon me.
No.
Excuse me. I'm very excited today. I'm kind of having a problem with interrupting. I'll work on it. I'll get better anyway. Then District Attorney Stacey Parks Miller, who was in downtown Bellefonte prosecuting the case at the time, had all of the brothers, and obviously there was no cameras in the courthouse, but there was graphics of it drawn, of all of the brothers and basically representing the Beta Theta Pi organization in front of the Bellefonte District Courthouse. And, you know, she said it wasn't really what she expected. It really just looked like a reunion for the brothers. And the whole thing was just a mess. You had lawyers walking out with the brothers basically saying, you know, this is a horrible situation, what happened, but my client should not be prosecuted. So there was a lot of deflecting blame, there was a lot of confusion. The cameras that were allowed to be used, which we're not going to get into, were not very clear. The whole thing was really just a mess, and that again alludes to the university's lack of control on these organizations.
I do also want to mention, the brothers knew what was going on at this point because there were messages that came out sent through the brothers saying, Timothy Piazza, this kid may be actually an issue. This may be a problem. They were aware. But when it goes to court, obviously, they don't want to put the blame on them, so they're going to try to do whatever they can to deflect the situation to either Timothy Piazza or an organization as a whole.
Exactly. And I've also personally seen around social media and different things a lot of backlash where a lot of people are saying they should have gotten more time. And I kind of see both sides to that, where like this was a horrible incident, but you know, they are in college. Maybe they didn't see the situation happening. I do see a lot of different sides of the story, but there are a lot of people who are in Greek life and who were close to the situation who thinks they deserved way more time.
Right, and a lot of this is popular and a lot of this is tradition. Like the event that they were doing, that was not the first time that event has ever been done here or anywhere.
Exactly.
Like that is an event that is publicly online seen as a norm for fraternities like the Beta Theta Pi institution.
Right, and it's crazy because after events like this, there is a period of time where things like that stop happening. But slowly, it gets forgotten,
Right.
and it just happens over and over again. I argue that they didn't deserve more time. I say more brothers deserve the time that they got.
And this is not only happening just at Penn State. This is happening at universities across the country. We don't even know about. This is just one of the few more publicized cases, and that's why the fact that this is more publicized, it's enacting change. And Tim Piazza's parents have been lobbying for years in the state and the nation, trying to get more laws passed. And I'm glad to see that it's finally, you know, working out with the national federal bill being passed in the House of Representatives this past month. So it's definitely good to see.
Well, that's what I always say. I mean, I feel like, as we know, this stuff happens all the time. Situations like this happen all the time, but it just takes that one to like push it over the edge. I mean, there have been so many situations with drinking too much, different hazing events around the country, and I feel like obviously a majority of them don't result in death, but I feel like it just takes that one to push it over the edge, and it's just such an unfortunate situation that it did have to happen to him.
And it's just crazy because we go to Penn State. I walk past this house every single day. This could happen to any fraternity brother here, any sorority sister this could happen to. And Timothy Piazza grew up about 20 minutes from both of us.
I'm getting pointed out here.
Okay, I know you live by me, so I'm just saying. But he grew up, like, this could happen to really anybody, and this could happen now. This could happen tonight at a party. You know, you never know, and it's just crazy that it happened so close to home.
Yeah, and you bring up walking by the house every day. I lived in the west side of campus freshman year, and I remember the first time I walked by that house, I like called my dad on the phone and I was like, oh, like it looks abandoned, like what's the situation with this? And that's kind of when I learned about the case, and I feel like even if you aren't aware, so many people walk by that house. It kind of serves as a reminder about how cruel fraternity hazing is, and for maybe someone who doesn't know the situation, it could bring light to the situation, and it really just is like a haunting memory. I mean, every time I walk past it, I get like chills. Like I can't not think about the situation when I walk past that house.
Well, something also eerie is even though the big letters were taken down, you can actually still see smaller letters on, I think, a fence post.
They're engraved into the poles that position the sidewalk in the middle of the house.
It's very, very eerie and scary. And I remember coming to college, when I just found out I was going to Penn State, we actually talked about it in my health class, kind of. So I think part of the awareness is not just making sure every college student knows, but start it in high school as well. Make them know the culture, make them know what they're going into, because I knew about it. I learned about it from my health teacher. So I think that's also really, really important as well.
And before we come here, we are required to take, I think every college is alcohol awareness courses, but I feel like they're not taken as seriously as they should be.
And you know what? The whole thing, unfortunately, is, I don't want to say unavoidable, but going to be very difficult to avoid in the future because, again, the university only has so much oversight. We could talk about that all we want, but we could also just talk about how heavily it is ingrained in culture. You see these national organizations on their Instagram. You know, I don't want to list 1,000 fraternities, but you'll know they say, we don't haze. You'll see in their guides for new members. We don't haze. We don't have quote-unquote pledges. Well, I hate to say that they do, and that all this is really doing is making them hide it more, which could actually engulf more of a problem in the future.
Exactly, I completely agree. Arnie, that is all the time we have for today. This case serves as a reminder about the dangers of fraternity and sorority hazing all around the United States. Timothy's family has since advocated for reform to prevent similar tragedies. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Eva. Stay tuned for our politics panel as they discuss the state of the race. We'll be right back at the desk. We are, once again, back at the desk. It's time to sit out over the politics panel to discuss the 2024 presidential election. Over to you, Yaya.
Thanks, Peter. This Monday marked the one-year anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel. This far-reaching conflict has become a top foreign policy issue in the U.S., an issue that for some citizens may sway their vote red or blue. Last weekend, former President Donald Trump revisited the site of his near-death experience a few days after his VP, J.D. Vance, took on Vice President Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, in a surprisingly civil debate. Jackson, Hamas's attack last year has still left American citizens reeling. How has this past year impacted U.S. foreign policy, or more specifically, citizens' attention to foreign policy?
Well, it's completely divided the nation, and more importantly, it's divided the Democratic Party, because right now you're seeing the Democrats try to play both sides of the issue. You have some that are supporting Israel, some that are supporting Palestine, and some Israeli supporters who say supporting Palestine means supporting Hamas, which is a terrorist group. And it's a very complex issue because this conflict has been going on for decades now, and the October 7th attack was just another one in the long history of these attacks. So, but as of right now, you're seeing over 40,000 Palestinians killed, most of them women and children, in the last year. You saw 254 hostages taken and 1,200 innocent people killed on October 7th. So it was essentially Israel's 9/11, and it was something that, you know, captivated the attention of the whole world. And at first, I think it was everyone was united against Hamas, but as time went on and as Israel kept bombing the Gaza Strip, it slowly started to become more and more 50-50 with who was supporting who. But yeah, I think that this conflict has really divided the country, and more specifically divided the Democrats.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jordan, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one thing that everyone can kind of agree on is what's happening over there is awful. And seeing this many citizens dying, it's terrible. And it's like everyone wants to see some solution come to fruition. And obviously, as of Monday, it's been a year, it's been happening, and it just doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. But the one thing that you mentioned that I think is really interesting is citizens' responses and reactions to this war. And I feel like you've seen a lot of people speaking out against it. I mean, even here at Penn State's campus, you see students and citizens, members of the community, coming together protesting. There was a protest yesterday. You've seen protests happening throughout this past year. This is an issue that people are paying attention to. This is an issue that people are talking about. And I think that's a great step, is to talk about what's happening in our world and to be aware of it instead of saying, well, it's not happening on U.S. soil, so it's not my problem. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I'm glad to see people really diving into this topic and understanding it and wanting to see something change.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I mean, I think that you're talking about the impact here at home for us in Pennsylvania and the United States. And what's really hurting a solution in the future for that conflict is extremism on both sides of the aisle. And us having extremism between Republicans and Democrats here, and a quote-unquote civil war politically inside both sides of our political parties, is not going to give us too much help towards them. And now, obviously, we do know that the United States' relationship with Israel is long-lasting. It's always been strong. But Netanyahu's, I don't want to say weak relationship, but messy relationship with Biden as a person, and that getting in the way of the United States' connection to this whole thing, is not solving any problems for anybody. And our division on college campuses, the difference in numbers that are being reported in different areas, AI pictures being used by celebrities posting online, misinformation is hurting this war. And this war is hurting not just the Middle East, but everywhere outside of the Middle East, and strengthening problems in the Middle East. Because now we're seeing more Iranian proxies and Iran involved in the situation as well. So really, if we're trying to find a solution, there's a lot that has to be done here and a lot that has to be done there in terms of ending extremism and remembering that we're all human beings and that we all love our religion and we all love each other.
Yeah, you know what, Ryan? I really agree with the last sentence you just said, because when we talk about such serious topics like war, I mean, all of us want peace. I know that might sound like out of the blue, and then might not. In actuality, no one wants this to happen.
I apologize.
No one wants this to happen, right? And we go back to our parties in America, and here, how is it affecting us? And I think it's the personal relationships that people have. It's their backgrounds that they can relate to and know more about. You said the misinformation. All these factors kind of funnel into this funnel, or this whatever. And it allows people to decide what they quote unquote believe in situations like this. And I can go a personal route and say that I have certain backgrounds, I don't have certain backgrounds, but I read what I read and I know what I know. And the fact that this is still a conflict, the fact that this is still in the loop right now, a year later, I think that's the most upsetting part.
How about lack of education? That's a big problem.
Definitely
too.
that. I think one thing that's been really interesting for me watching this unfold real time is I feel like in our lifetime, in our generation, this is our first time where we're really seeing the U.S.'s relationship with its allies overseas really being tested. And you think about Ukraine, the situation going on in Ukraine versus the situation going on in Israel and Palestine, and because the alliances are just so different, that makes, because it's kind of the same thing basically, it's just two different states and entities fighting for territorial rights, right? If we're boiling it down to the most basic level.
Absolutely.
And I want to really emphasize this is the most basic level or explanation of what these two conflicts are. But the reaction from at home, from citizens, not just from politicians, towards Ukraine, and the reaction towards Palestine really shows that this goes so much deeper. And I'm glad Jackson mentioned that this is a decades-long conflict. This goes so much deeper than just October 7th. This is years of resentment and antagonism that has just kind of boiled over. And I think it's really, for a lot of people, it seems like it's a fight within the U.S. between our humanity and staying loyal to our allies overseas.
Yes, and I want to comment on something Francie said. So you said nobody wants this to happen. I disagree. I think some people do want this to happen. We have the military-industrial complex here in America.
She didn't exactly mean
it wasn't. It wasn't like I meant in actuality,
regular people.
The people of this country do not want this to happen.
Republicans and Democrats talking about certain sides of this, no one's going for
Yes,
I see what you were trying to generate out of it, but it's not necessarily true the way you presented it, because when we're seeing some of the tactics Hamas is using, when we're seeing some of the ways people in America respond to questions from people who identify as Jewish or the other way around, not necessarily true, but I understand what you're saying.
I was coming
people
from
who don't benefit from this conflict do not want to see it happen.
Absolutely. The large majority.
It's a very small group of people
you're
that
going to say
benefits,
that.
absolutely, but those people hold a lot of power, and they are selling billions of dollars worth of equipment to Ukraine and Israel, and it's resulting in death. And a lot of the American populace is sick of it.
Yeah.
That's my point here.
Yeah.
I'm saying that there are people in charge of our government right now who are sending this stuff over to Israel, and they're keeping this war going.
Yeah.
Instead of making a peace deal.
Hold on there. I think the responsibility lies in the Likud party. I mean, we could talk about Netanyahu. I understand that's your political side.
Actually, Blinken has also gone through a lot of
but
ceasefire deals, and there has not been a lot of responses on Netanyahu.
Right.
And I mean, over the past summer, there was reports and reports of Blinken going out saying, "Hey, I've talked with these people. We're working on a ceasefire." Yeah, we're working on a ceasefire deal, and it didn't actually live up to their standards.
It falls through every time. And I think, Jackson, what you said kind of, I want to tie it back to the point about people benefiting from this and the ties of the U.S. and Israel, because when we talk about ceasefire deals, and when the U.S. talks about ceasefire deals, to me it's okay, obviously you're saying you want a ceasefire, but you're still sending the fire.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
What-
so
what
it's
the-
like,
what
so
you're-
that's why it's
Yeah.
like the push and the pull between do we stay loyal or do we do everything in our power to end a humanitarian
Well,
crisis?
I think that just shows the complexity of this issue. There is no one solution. This is going to take an entire village to come together and say, let's stop what's happening. And it's not just on the part of one person. It's not on the part of the president, Netanyahu. The people selling weapons. This is going to be a collective effort that's just not happening at this point in time.
This is
It's
the
like a
fight.
game.
Right. This is the
It's a
fight.
game.
What she's basically
I
saying.
mean, not like a game in getting a ceasefire. Like one person's like, actually, yeah, wait, that doesn't live up to our standards. You said we blah blah blah, and it's like back and forth. Like
all the time.
She's referring to the fight against extremism, where most people in Palestine do not agree with the way Hamas has been
Absolutely
governing,
not.
and the way
Absolutely
Hamas
not.
has been fighting, and a large amount of people, now I don't have the exact poll numbers in Israel, are not a fan of how the Likud party has been governing and believe Netanyahu has to hit the road sooner than later.
Right. So
Absolutely.
I'm gonna wrap up this conversation. As much as I would love to continue talking, this is something we can say for our group chat.
Group chat.
But going to our presidential candidates, Trump back in Butler, starting his speech with, as I was saying,
I think
lots of iconic moments from Trump this year.
regardless of who you're supporting, who you're voting for in this election, I think everyone well, I shouldn't generalize there, but you can see that Trump going back to Butler, where there was an assassination attempt on his life a couple of months ago. It's very powerful. It's very strong to see like, hey, this happened to me. People are trying to silence me. I won't be silenced, and I'm back where it happened because I'm not afraid and I'm here to stay. And I think there's some power behind that, and I think it's a good message to just the whole world, really, that like we don't condone violence, we don't accept that as a means to an end, and I'm coming back and I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere.
That seems to be a recurring theme on Trump's campaign. I'm here to stay. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
how about Elon Musk?
Well, I
I'm so
have
happy
very,
you brought
very
that
mixed
up.
feelings about that. So
How
I
about
like the endorsement.
that?
I think the endorsement was good from Elon Musk. He is a very influential figure, but at the same time, the jump. Come on, the jump. Well, what was that, Elon? I couldn't get behind that part of it. But no, I think his speech was overall a little stuttery, but it was good. And I think that the crowd showing up and did you guys see the size of the crowd that showed to Butler?
Huge.
I mean, they were saying 100K. I think it was less than that, but I mean, it looked like 100K.
I saw as little as 24K.
I know, I saw 24K as well, but I mean, it looked like a lot of people.
It's like WrestleMania. Have any of you
Yes.
seen the WWE documentary? Was it 94? Was it 78? Was it 22?
But it was a lot of people, and they all broke out and sang the national anthem together randomly. It was definitely a very patriotic night in Butler, and it's the most important swing state of the election. So I do think this is really going to help Trump's momentum going into November 5th.
For sure. Talking about momentum, let's pivot and talk about the vice presidential debate. So normally the vice presidential debate, nobody really cares. But I think this election cycle has seen, I think we have two vice presidential candidates that are characters that stand out on their own without the title of vice presidential candidate. So I'm going to pivot. I'm going to ask Francie, what did you think of the debate?
We could talk all day about the debate because for me,
We
I
could talk
felt
all
like
day
it
about a lot of
was.
things.
I felt like it was something that if everyone was tuning into the vice presidential debate like they were tuning into the presidential debate, there would be a little more sense of, I don't want to say comfort, comfort's not the right word, but they were definitely handling each other in a way that was more civil and it was more,
A lot more positive.
it was, and granted, Vance has had a good history in his debate and he knows how to,
He knows how to work a stage.
yes, he does. And I don't know, I can make an assumption that maybe he knew that if he brought in, nodded his head with Waltz on some things, and same with Waltz, maybe if they knew that, maybe not on his spot, but maybe if there was a preconception of like,
We're gonna come in here with
let me
civil
come out and
civility.
stand as one that, doesn't always have to disagree.
He needed to
And-
humanize the ticket.
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
He needed
And-
to humanize the ticket, and he succeeded.
And
Yes.
he did it
To
very,
a very great extent.
Yeah, I think
Well
I
done.
think that the left's main accusation of J.D. Vance has been that he's weird. To
Right.
me, he's probably the most normal guy I've ever seen in my life.
Right,
Like,
I
I'm
thought
not-
he
I'm
was
not
weird
even-
too.
I know.
I thought he was weird too.
He was all against Trump, and then all of a sudden it's all buddy with
That
him.
is a little strange he switched that up. I'm saying just as a person, he seems to be the most normal guy ever. He has a wife, kids, a German Shepherd. He seems to be like the most normal American man ever.
Well, they mean
That's the
pol- they
branding.
mean-
You can brand that on
Wait,
anyone.
can
They
we let-
mean, they
let's-
mean,
let's
po-
let
they mean
Jordan speak.
policies wise.
Well, and I think one of the
I don't
big
see what's wrong with his
things-
policies.
Oh, obviously you don't. You're conservative.
Let's let Jordan speak.
I think one of the big things with this debate was that I feel like it humanized both of these candidates, and I think a lot of people had an issue with, I don't feel like I know them. I don't feel like I know what they stand for. Maybe, or they have these misconceptions of they're weird or they say crazy things. And I think this debate really helped show who these candidates are and let the American people get to know them a lot better. And I think that achieved a goal. I think that's what we needed. And I think this debate wasn't necessarily barking back and forth at each other, throwing around insults, but it was a lot more civil. And I just think it had a better outcome than it would have if they would have taken it in a different direction.
It was a breath of fresh air. Honestly, watching a debate where I didn't feel like I had to pull my hair out, I was very excited. One thing I do want to say is, I'm gonna agree with Jackson. When I first saw just clips and stuff of Vance, I would look at him. I'm like, this guy's a little strange to me. He seems a little off. But when I was watching the debate, he's very articulated. You can tell he didn't get that Yale degree for nothing. You can tell he put work into that one. But he was very well articulated. I think I would have liked to see him as a presidential candidate. Actually, hot take. Very hot take.
That's a very hot take.
Very hot take.
Very hot take. Most people want him off the ticket.
Now.
Very hot.
Well, that opinion may have changed recently, though.
Can I explain myself? Not because I agree with his policies. But because I think I like the way he presents his policies more, and we heard more policy from him than Trump.
He's media friendly. He needed to. He had two goals.
Friendly.
He needed to bring debate momentum. He needed to bring.
Media friendly.
He needed to bring debate momentum back to the Trump ticket because the Trump ticket lost it. I know you're going to disagree, but that's just the general outset on it.
No, he went off the rails a little bit.
He needed to instill confidence in the ticket and his own look, and that's what he did. He succeeded. And Waltz, you could obviously tell he wasn't very comfortable on air because he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He had the problem with Tiananmen Square, etc. We're not going to get into that. The whole point is that Vance won that debate.
Definitely. Yep. And that is all the time we have for today. With less than a month until Election Day, everyone is going to be focused on policy. ATD Politics will be bringing you more in-depth analysis of the various issues that Americans are focused on in this election cycle. It's going to be a fun couple of weeks, and we hope you'll continue to stick with us as we navigate the craziness that is American politics. We'll save a seat for you next week at the desk. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Aya. Stay tuned for the package all about the secret history of Bellefonte and the Underground Railroad. We'll be right back at the desk.
The Underground Railroad was the network of people, black, white, Native American, wealthy, and poor, men and women, who assisted African Americans escape the institution of slavery in the 19th century. There are many different towns and places that were used to get freed slaves up north. One of the most significant places in Pennsylvania is right here, 20 minutes from State College in Bellefonte. I have the privilege of being here today in a town full of history regarding the Underground Railroad. Bellefonte played a crucial role in the Underground Railroad. They were one of the first towns in America where slavery was forbidden. Due to the early anti-slavery movement taking place here, this became a home for former slaves and freemen. Bellefonte has so much history that it has a whole self-guided tour which I will be walking you through here at the desk on the road. The first stop on the tour is here at the Bellefonte Museum of Art. Built in 1810, the museum was originally known as the Lynn House. The Lynn House was once a residential property that served as a home to several prominent residents. Both Mary Benner Wilson and Jacob Valentine Thomas are believed to have been active in the Underground Railroad. Making this claim credible is the existence of a hidden crawl space located on the 3rd floor of the house. The compartment allegedly was used to conceal escaped slaves that were en route to Canada. There is a year-round virtual exhibit here at the museum for the Underground Railroad. Our second stop is here at the Samuel Harris House. The home was built in around 1830 for Samuel Harris, a cabinet maker, and his wife Nancy, who were two prominent allies in the Underground Railroad. And similarly to the Lynn House, there is also a hidden room on the 3rd floor of the house that was believed to help hide the people that were trying to escape to freedom. You can still visit the Harris House and the secret room today. Next stop on the tour is the courthouse area, featuring a statue of Andrew Curtin. The story of Curtin and Henry Thomas highlights Bellefonte's role in aiding freedom seekers. After escaping slavery in Maryland and Virginia, Thomas worked at the Pennsylvania Hotel, now the Brockerhoff House, in 1856. When two disguised Southern agents sought his help, he unknowingly insisted in his own abduction under the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. Andrew Curtin, a local lawyer and future governor of Pennsylvania, learned of Thomas's situation and quickly gathered a posse to pursue him and the kidnappers. Although they failed to rescue Thomas,
The incident illustrates the dangers of slavery, even in a safe community. Curtin's actions reflect his character as he later supported the Union during the Civil War. This story is documented in the writings of William H. Mills, a barber in the 1870s. Now we're here at the Governor's Pub, formerly called the Mills Barber Shop. William H. Mills ran a barbershop near the current Governor's Pub and significantly contributed to Bellefonte's Underground Railroad history. Born in 1847, he learned barbering and then opened his own shop in 1871. He notably cut Frederick Douglass's hair during a speaking tour in 1872. An active member of the AME Church, Mills helped establish the local Masonic Lodge and worked to desegregate Bellefonte schools in 1885. He also sang with local Jubilee singers, a tradition continued by his grandchildren, who formed the famous jazz pop group, the Mills Brothers, inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1998. Our next stop is here at the St. Paul Church. The church, established in 1859, served as a cultural hub for the Black community. The original church burned down in 1909, and the current structure behind me was built in 1910. William H. Mills, a secretary and preacher, documented the church's history after the fire and highlighted connections to the Underground Railroad. He also chronicled the life of Reverend Isaiah H. Welch, who escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad and later became a prominent educator. The site honors Reverend Dr. Donna King, known as Mama King, for her work on the abolitionist movement and the Underground Railroad in central Pennsylvania. She led walking tours to preserve the church's legacy. The church is still in use today for services. Our last stop on the tour is here at the Gamble Mill area. Although the mill, built in 1893, is not an official Underground Railroad site, it connects to this history through William A. Thomas, who donated land for the AME Church and sheltered Isaiah Welch's parents. Thomas owned a mill at this location and was an active conductor on the Underground Railroad, offering refuge to fugitive slaves in his home. William H. Mills highlighted Thomas's compassionate actions, including purchasing the freedom of John Williams and his family. Thomas also deeded the land for the current AME Church, ensuring its legacy in the community. Thank you guys for taking the self-guided tour with me in Bellefonte, and we will see you guys back at the desk on the road.
We are back at the desk. Now it's time for the history panel, as they discuss political cartoons. Over to you, Shay.
Thanks, Peter. Art has the power to tell a story, especially when it matters. From policy to revolution to war, it has the power to persuade minds and compel emotions, much like our words do. And that's why we're taking a look at two specific forms of art today. Now, each panelist has found political cartoons and propaganda posters from all over the world. But here's the catch. The other panelists don't know the context behind these pictures and have to guess the story that these pictures are trying to tell us. The rules are simple. If they guess the context of a picture correctly, they get a point. The panelist with the most points wins. With that being said, let's go back in time and take a look at our first picture.
Very excited.
I'm excited.
Hey.
Oh.
All right.
I thought that was a very different word than what it is.
I'm going to take a stab at it and say that this is from the 1930s in Texas. That's probably the guess that I would take.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. It's not mine, so.
It is mine, so I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Jamie, do you have any guesses?
Well, I'm trying to pull it apart a little bit here. You might have to come back to me.
I mean, I'm seeing it looks like there's two horses, but only three men. The other horse is blending into the gentleman's pants there. I am very much intrigued by the flags. I don't know what they mean.
Me neither.
That's what's tripping me up.
Yeah.
If it is
The
from
color of the
Mexico,
poles, too.
I'm unsure of what kind of event was happening in the 1930s in Mexico because, you know, the United States was dealing with our own problems at that point in time.
Right.
I.e., Great Depression.
Yes.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's somewhere in Mexico. I don't know quite what was going on then either. So I'm gonna say some type of war. They were fighting somebody.
All right. Are we ready for the answer?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Please.
Brayden, you were half right, so I'll give you a point for this. It is from the 1930s Brazilian Revolution.
Oh.
Wow.
So, yeah, the three flags represent the three states that joined forces to overthrow the federal government. I believe they are the flags of Minas Gerais, Paraíba, and Rio Grande do Sul. And yeah, it was none of the states at the time actually had flags, so these were kind of like unofficial flags for the states, and that in itself was a form of revolution. But yeah, they formed an alliance and overthrew Washington Luis.
Oh, Washington Luis.
That was his name.
Luis?
Wow. Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Poor Washington Luis.
Yeah, it was
very
called
nice
the
picture.
Coffee and Milk Revolution because the price of coffee just kept rising.
So like their version of the Tea Party.
Their version of the Boston Tea, in a way. In a way.
I love it when revolutions are named after just inconspicuous stuff, like the Velvet Revolution, Coffee and Milk. I love
Czech Republic,
it.
Velvet Revolution.
Right.
Only peaceful revolution in history.
All right.
Czech Republic.
Next
What do we
one.
All right,
What's
we
next?
ready for the next?
Oh.
This one is mine.
Okay.
So be quiet.
Oh.
Okay.
Can I take a shot at this?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so I'm seeing royalty. I'm seeing Chine, which is French, right? So I'm guessing this has something to do with like China and European relations. I'm not sure. The French is tripping me up here, but I want to. No, it can't be the Opium War. That was way before this, right?
I believe the lady on the left might be the Queen of England.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I was thinking, but it's in French. So maybe it's a French cartoon published about the British and Chinese relations.
The bun in the hair of the gentleman on the right is giving me Japanese. So I feel like it's some sort of global conflict.
And the lady back there, I know nothing about her. She seems French to me.
Yes.
She seems very French.
So I feel like it definitely would
So
be.
is Chine like Indochine?
Français.
Is it Indochine? Then but then
I'm gonna guess it's a World War I period kind of illustration. That's what I believe. I don't know the context behind it. I'd say we're on World War I, so I'd say 1920s, 30s as well.
I'm also going to guess World War I just because of his hat right over there and then China being split open. I'm going to go with World War I.
yeah, I think that's a good guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys are all kind of knocking on the door here. This is called China, the Cake of Kings and Emperors, and it was made in 1898, so a little bit before World War I. It's in reference to an era of China known as the Century of Humiliation. And the cartoon depicts the imperial powers of the late 19th century sort of carving up China like a cake. It looks a bit more like a pizza, but that's what they called it. They were seeking to exploit the resources and control the trade in China, and all while ignoring the sovereignty and the best interest of the people there. And there were some unfortunate sort of caricatures in there, but they display it. So.
Product of the times.
Yeah.
I think the next one is mine. I'm really excited.
Next one.
It is.
Oh,
This
okay.
next one is
Of course
mine.
it's yours.
Goodness.
You're gonna have to be naked to get into the Met Museum. That's really interesting.
This is my favorite one.
That
I
is
found.
very
You guys
interesting.
know. This is my favorite.
Is that what is she
thing I might have
holding?
ever found. I don't know what she's holding, but it's a gorilla mask.
Maybe it's best we don't.
Why does it look like a feather duster almost?
Yeah, right.
It does look like a feather duster.
She's holding the end of the blanket. She's laying on a blanket.
Oh, I was thinking a lewd feather duster.
Lewd is definitely one way to describe it.
Well, this is interesting. Oh, I don't think.
Well, that's the answer. Gorilla Girls in 1989. So the Gorilla Girls are still an anonymous group of artists. They still exist today. They are a pro-feminist group of artists. What's interesting about the Gorilla Girls is they all go by different acronyms of different famous artists. So the woman pictured in that one, she goes by Kahlo, Frida Kahlo, Frida Kahlo, I believe it's pronounced. The Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. Yeah. So Frida Kahlo actually died 35 years before this image was taken. This was actually commissioned by the Met to do. And interestingly enough, the way they got their statistics was literally by going around the Met and counting, which I think was pretty cool. But their website basically says they've been waging guerrilla warfare on modern art, and they are pro-feminist. Right now they still have a lot of different movements. You can literally go to their website and find all sorts of different art pieces that they've done throughout the world, especially with Israel-Palestine, especially with the Me Too movement over the last 10 years. It's really interesting, and they've been doing it since the 1980s. Warhol even mentioned them a few times in his art, or his interviews, I should say. And yeah, I mean, really interesting stuff. This is my favorite one that I found by far, and this is their most famous work too. So, and the fact it was commissioned by the Met to do it about the Met, to make a commentary on them, is I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, very provocative, very good way to grab people's attention.
Impressive wordplay as well.
Gorilla Girls. Yeah, that's why they started off wearing just bandanas. Now they wear masks. They're gorilla masks.
I like that evolution.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the next one.
Next one.
Oh, this one's mine. I really liked this one. This one tickled my fancy.
I'm gonna say this is 1950s McCarthyism. You know how it goes.
I was going to say 1950s McCarthyism as well. I mean,
Red
yeah.
herring.
Come on, it's a snake.
Right.
Witch hunt.
Communism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Witch hunt,
Yeah.
red.
I mean, let's go back to our high school literature classes. What's it called? The Crucible?
Yeah.
Everybody knows who that was written about.
Yeah.
Good friend, Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys nailed it on the head. So this was 1953. It's called How We Tag a Viper by Jerry Costello. So this was definitely about the Red Scare. It tried to shame people that thought that the Red Scare was a conspiracy. It refers specifically to a 1948 Harry Truman speech where he labeled a House Un-American Activities Committee investigation as a red herring. So he kind of depicts communism as this like vicious threat, this viper waiting to attack on U.S. soil. So
Red herring.
definitely
too.
something trying to get the public to react to.
I think calling it
Yeah.
the red herring is very interesting, like in literary terms.
I
and
love
such.
logical fallacies like that.
Yeah.
So
That's
interesting.
really interesting.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
I really like that tag. That's interesting.
That is, yeah.
Who's this next? Are we back?
Let's
on?
go next.
Or is yours? Yours is up now.
Hope it's
Oh my gosh, I'm
yes.
so excited.
Okay.
Oh,
more
man.
snakes.
Whoa,
This
What
is
does it
cool.
say
a lot to
here?
look at. All right, I
Monopoly.
see Subway franchise, political
Like
poll.
the sandwich restaurant.
I'm thinking
Steel.
more trains.
Political pool.
Wire trust, maybe? Is that what the lip says? Bottom.
Yeah, I feel like just from art style alone, I can't see this being anything earlier than the 1960s or 70s.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to attribute this to late 90s, early 2000s, economy crashes, economy's in a bad state before 9/11. That's what I'm looking at. I'm going to make a stab at 1996 is my guess.
Okay. Specific
Precise.
date. Yeah. I'm like really taken aback by the monster of it all. Like the face is so striking, the eyes being rainbow, whereas the rest of the portrait is covered in blue. It's really interesting to me. I kind of want to take it a little bit further back, 1980s era, late 70s, 80s feels.
You know, it really reminds me of like one of those Chinese dragon floats that you would
Yeah.
see.
That's
in a
what's
parade.
sticking in my mind right
So,
now, yeah.
I'm thinking it might have something to do with China. I don't know exactly what though.
Right. So
I'm thinking post-Cold War. Oh,
there you go. Yeah.
1899
actually,
was when that was
Oh my
made?
God.
Yeah, actually.
Oh my goodness.
So
We
you
were
guys are
off.
Very off days. But basically, this is called the Menace of the Hour. So during this time period, this is kind of representative of America's transition from our Gilded Age into this era of economic reform. And so you saw the words monopoly written on the beast's tentacles. The octopus, quote unquote, was actually a favorite recurring image / metaphor in political cartoons during this age because it represents the sprawling grip that monopolies had on the American economy. So it's kind of a criticism of the rise of monopolies in the American economy, which I think is something that is still very pertinent today. So I thought that was a really cool graphic.
Yeah,
Gorgeous
that is
painting too.
really cool.
That looks really good.
Yeah.
I mean, for the time that early, that looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I must say, I'm a fan. Shit.
Next one.
Cheese is up.
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, this is funny.
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh, I'm seeing French at the bottom there again.
There's a lot going
She
on.
can speak French. That's not fair.
Not my fault.
La Femme Bentois.
Oh, I feel it's so interesting seeing like the noblemen on the back of the.
Right? So I want to say this is probably like pre-French Revolution.
Huh.
That's what it's giving to me.
Yeah.
That seems right.
On the backs of the old and the poor, I would say pre-French Revolution. So.
Right? What do they call it? The third estate? Maybe I'm
Yeah.
getting that wrong.
Something like that. Yeah.
Well, you are all wrong. I'm just kidding. You're all right. This is pre-French Revolution.
Like, wait, what the
It translates to "Here's to hoping that this game's over soon." And yeah, it's a political cartoon from pre-revolutionary France. And as you can kind of see on that image, they were kind of literally on the back of the peasants. His shoes were literally frayed. They were completely gone. So it's pretty straightforward.
And it's a very
Bit of
apt,
softball.
Pretty softball.
very
Yeah, I
apt
appreciate
metaphor
it.
for even
Yeah.
the world we're living in today. You could say that the economy we have now is on the backs of the working class.
Yeah.
Funny how time. Okay.
This one is mine,
Anyways.
once again.
Oh, another octopus.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's gotta
this
be
is definitely like
mercantilism.
19.
on
It's
I
gotta
really
be
hate that.
mercantilism.
This is definitely. I think I've even seen this
1000%
graphic before.
mercantilism.
Actually,
probably
this
have.
is definitely like 19th century post Berlin Conference, like when the British Empire is like at its peak. Because I'm seeing Egypt, India. What is that saying? Canada, Jamaica. I'm not seeing anything
Ireland, I
about.
think, is
Yeah,
that
Ireland's
one.
underneath
Yeah.
is one of
Yes.
his many tentacles. I hate this picture, by the way. I just wanted to share that with you. He looks like Gene Wilder, and I don't
Okay.
like that.
We even have the canal, like the Suez Canal. Yeah, this is like definitely British Empire at its peak.
Do you
Yeah.
want to take a stab
Yeah,
at
it's,
the year?
it's mercantilism.
At the year?
It's exactly what Yaya said. It's colonization, mercantilism, England literally colonizing everyone.
Can I say like 1850s to 1880s?
You're on the upper end of it, yeah. So it's 1888 that it was
There you
created.
go.
This is called the devilfish in Egyptian waters. Pardon me. That person that you saw depicted there, I probably should have redacted the thing where it said England underneath, because that's actually a symbol of the United Kingdom. That's a character called, John Bull. And he's sort of like the Uncle Sam of the United Kingdom, so he's almost like a symbol of their country, and that's why he was the head of the octopus. And you guys had it. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. The tentacles were all reaching out onto the British Empire, all of their colonies and territories. So, yeah, just showing the sprawling imperialism. So, yeah.
The sun has indeed set.
Looked like Gene Wilder to me.
Okay.
Maybe Gene Wilder.
I'm sure
has
Gene
lineage.
Wilder will take offense. Ooh.
This is one of mine.
I like this.
this
Okay,
sounds
I'm seeing
good
at the
again.
back,
That's
beautiful.
reserved for capitalists,
Oh,
monopoly.
I love the arrogance on the feather of the knight. That's really cool.
This is really
Labor,
detailed.
strike, poverty.
What is labor on the guy's little hat?
Just because it's gold, I'm gonna go with Gilded Age for that.
It
Monopoly
feels-
too.
It feels very industrialism with the train of the horse, and like just completely thinking about how divided the wealth classes were at that time of the Gilded Age. Yeah, industrialism, that whole specter, and seeing like all those white old men, seemingly rich old men on the side, and then the poverty-stricken, poorer men on the other side.
Give me a year.
Let's hear the answer then.
Yeah,
1883.
83. So this was actually painted
Three.
in by his name is Franklin Grates, and it was in Puck magazine in New York, which was one of the very first actually like comedic magazines in history. And yeah, it shows the Industrial Revolution.
And that's all the time we have for today. So let's come back to the present and congratulate our winner, Yaya. We hope you got to see just how powerful of a message art can send, especially from the eyes of the past. We'll see you next week at the History Panel. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Shay. Stay tuned for another edition of ATD International. Welcome back to At the Desk, and my personal favorite section of the show, ATD International.
Thanks, Peter. Welcome back to ATD International. I'm Lauren Perry.
And I'm Ryan Patterson. On Wednesday, Mexico swore in Claudia Sheinbaum, the country's first female president. The former scientist and mayor of Mexico City won the election in June by a landslide, capturing 60% of the vote. Sheinbaum ran on leftist-leaning positions, including climate advocacy, housing and infrastructure improvements, and social programs, along with an increase in authoritarianism. She inherits a country with a struggling economy, rising debt, and rampant cartel violence.
This Monday marked 1 year since the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. According to CNN, these attacks killed 1,200 people in southern Israel and took more than 250 hostages into Gaza. Palestinian health authorities say Israel's campaignage in Gaza has killed more than 41,500 people, with the majority of the victims being women and children. Many Palestinians fled their homes, causing displacement crisis. These attacks have been the worst in Israel and Palestine history, and the deadliest conflict between Palestinians and Israelis in half a century. As the war has reached its 1 year anniversary, according to New York Times, Israel faces a wider war, potentially with Iran and Lebanon, which had launched its missiles at Israel last week.
China's stock market has reopened after a break-in to a massive surge in share prices. This comes after a stimulus package that was passed by the Chinese government in an effort to aid its struggling economy. Despite this, Asian markets as a whole remain unchanged, especially in Hong Kong, where share prices slid in a skeptical reaction to the package.
A Russian court sentenced a U.S. citizen to prison for fighting for Ukraine. Stephen Hubbard, age 72, is sentenced to prison for 6 years and 10 months by Moscow court. Accused for fighting against Russia for monetary compensation, prosecutors say he fought with Ukraine after signing a contract for $1,000 per month. He pleaded guilty last month. That's all we have for your ATD International Update.
Thanks, Ryan and Lauren. Sadly, that is all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATD on all our socials at PSU at the Desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Peter Alfaro, and we will see you back at the desk next week.